Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this webinar all about training for Endure24. My name is Ed. I'm a member of the team here at Threshold Sports, the company behind Endure24. And I will be your host for the evening, and I'll be chatting to some of our special guests who I'll introduce shortly. Do let us know in the chat where you are joining us from, and also let us know if you are taking part in Endure24 this year and whether you're running as a solo runner or as part of a team. I know we've got some people in from some of the teams who've been with us for a long time from Finch Hampstead. James says hello from Crystal Palace. James, I live in Crystal Palace. We could be neighbours. That's pretty exciting stuff. Let me introduce some of the people who may have appeared on your screen just now before we kick things off and dive into the content. So as I said, my name is Ed. I'm a member of the team here at Threshold Sports. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Neil Watson, another member of the team who insisted for this photo upon wearing his Welsh flag jersey. How are you doing, Neil?
Very good. Thank you, Ed. Looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. If you've run Endure24 before, you might recognize Neil from the start line announcement. He is our MC at the beginning of the race. We're also joined by Anya Culling. Anya is a runner coach and a ridiculously fast marathon runner who is joining us today from South Africa, Stellenbosch. Is that right, Anya?
Yeah, I'm actually back in Cape Town now, but hi everybody. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to welcome you today. And we are, of course, joined by a man who needs no introduction for the Endure24 audience, Joe Baker, coach and Endure24 course record holder. How are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem. I mean, Joe's gone to the great lengths of inflating our finish line gantry in his own living room, as you can see. So we had to welcome him. Joe, another Joe on the call says, hi from Leeds. She is 1 kilometre from the Bramham Endure site. That is excellent, Joe. You can get out and do a training run every day in the build up to the event. So let's just quickly outline what we're going to be chatting through today. We're going to be talking through, of course, how to approach your training for Endure24. And we will have some event-specific insights on that. Obviously, Joe is very familiar with the event, has run it many times. But Anya, as we'll find out, is training for, I wouldn't say a similar event, but a similar task, as we'll discuss in a minute. So there's lots we can discuss there. But we'll also talk about, and this is based on the questions that we took in advance, a number of topics that came up in those questions. So many of you asked about pacing, particularly as solo runners, of course, who are going to be out there for 24 hours, but also as a team, how to go about structuring your race for success with regards to pacing. We'll chat about recovering between laps, which is obviously quite a unique element of this race. Once you stop running, that doesn't necessarily mean that your race is over. You've got to run again in a few hours. So how do you best go about ensuring you're recovered in order to do that? We will chat through nutrition, a massive part of the Endure24 experience, both in terms of sports nutrition, but also just good old-fashioned food. And we will chat about preparing your team, particularly on the sort of team dynamic element, the social element, the psychological element. It's a massive part of the Endure24 experience and not something that you necessarily have to think about in other sort of traditional, solo running events. And then we'll finish off with a bit of a general Q&A just to get to any questions that people didn't get answered. If you do have any questions as we go along, just drop them in the chat. And we will try to answer as many of those throughout the webinar and at the end if we don't have time to get to them. Louise says, hello from Maidenhead, doing solo so she can do her own thing. That is a good way to avoid the team dynamic problem. Before we jump into these subjects, Anya, I just want to chat to you a little bit about the aforementioned project that you're training for, which is called the Speed Project. Could you, for people who don't know, bring our audience up to speed on what the Speed Project is?
Yes, so this is my next challenge, which is the Speed Project, which is a 340-mile race from LA to Vegas. And yeah, similar to this, it can either be solo or with a team. And I'm doing it with a team. So it's a similar like multi-stage kind of event for me. But yeah, with my background of marathon running, it's kind of new to me, this new style of training. And, actually like training my body for things other than just the running aspects, because it is so much more about recovery and eating like an ultra event like this. But it has opened my eyes up to the world of ultra running and trail running a little bit more. But yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's at the end of this month, and I mean, we're hoping to do it in about 40 hours and about 50 miles each, or yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be brilliant. Yeah.
That is going to be quite the adventure. Really looking forward to following that, and I'm sure some of the training that you've been doing in preparation for that will feed into this this webinar today. The picture on the left here, this is your teammates presumably. How did you all get together?
So I kind of pitched this as an idea to Lululemon, and we are just a group of girls who really get on. There's a few like social media girls in there, so you might know like Savannah and Mary McCarthy in there. But we all just get on really well, and we thought, what's going to bring us closer than us all living in an RV together, and someone cycling, someone running, and someone driving the RV up and through Death Valley for a few days of minimal sleep and, you know, trying to keep morale high. But yeah, so we're just a group of girls, and our aim is to do a little study on us and our running performance, just to help close the gender data science gap a little bit, and yeah, just hopefully provide some kind of research into female endurance sports, because that's lacking a little. But yeah, it's just going to be an amazing challenge. Yeah, that's the plan.
You've described it like it's a great sort of team bonding experience. So I think we might.
I think it's going to be hard. Yeah, it's basically
the threshold office. I'm not sure how many people will take us up on that.
Yeah, I think it's all like, it's completely you have to be self-sufficient.
Yes.
There's it's like an unsanctioned race. You have to plot your own routes. You have to, you know, bring all your fueling, sleep in your RV, plan that. There's no support along the way because yeah, it's an unsanctioned race. So it's going to be wild.
Amazing. Frontiers of ultra running. Well, so that's a bit of context for what Anya's training for at the moment. Before we dive into the meat of the webinar, we do just have to mention Runna. Anya is a runner coach, and Runna are the official training partner of Endure24. The great thing about the Runna app, if you've not heard of it before, is that it is completely custom to you. So if you have a particular a goal in mind at Endure24 or any other event, you can input that goal, that distance you're trying to achieve, and also tell it things like how many days a week you can train, what strength training equipment you have access to, all kinds of stuff like that, and it will generate a training plan for you. There is a discount code you can use, E24, and you'll get a 2-week free trial to test it out. But we do highly recommend the Runna app if you are looking to go the distance.
Yeah, I'm one of the coaches on there, so if you ever need the support, you can use the chat function, and I'll probably be the one replying.
Fantastic. So let's, with training in mind, let's talk a little bit about training then, and how to go about approaching it. Now we had a long think at the Threshold office, and we've consulted with some people around really what the differences are between training for Endure24 and any other sort of distance running event. And actually, not a particularly exciting insight, but it is the truth. The vast majority of your training is going to probably be the same. So everyone at Endure24 will have a different goal, of course. If you're a solo runner going for your first 100 miler, or if you're in a team of 12 and you're looking to do maybe 3, maybe 4 laps, your goals are going to be very different. But training for that goal is largely going to look the same as it would if you were training for that distance in a normal event. So if you're going for 5 laps, just short of a marathon, you probably want to follow a marathon training plan. If you're going for 100 miles, you probably want to follow a 100-mile training plan. There is one caveat to that, which we will get to momentarily. But it'd be good before we get to the twist in the tail to just establish sort of what that that good training sort of generally looks like. Hopefully nothing too shocking to anyone here, but let's just establish some of the basics. So sticking to some kind of routine day by day is going to be massively helpful. Most training plans, including the Runna training plans, will follow a weekly routine. You might have a workout on a particular day, like a Wednesday. You might have a long run on the weekend, but following that routine is going to be hugely helpful. The vast majority of your running is going to be easy running, of course, which is massively important. And also you're going to have those rest days, which are really important to take seriously. Those days where you're not running, you might be doing a bit of cross training, you might just be doing some walking, but they're hopefully going to help you recover. Anya, you're a runner who is sort of running at an elite level. Does much change at the elite level in terms of just following these basic principles for how to sort of execute a good training plan?
No, yeah, unfortunately, there's no like secret method. It is about staying consistent and just, you know, yeah, just training like you do every single day. I would say yeah, stick to an 80-20 training rule. So 80% easy, 20% hard. You want to be building that base a lot at the beginning through a lot of easy running. And as you say, take rest seriously, because you need those rest days in order to absorb the training. Otherwise, you'll just be continuously breaking down your body and getting more fatigued, and you won't actually get those training benefits. So yeah, again, something that's really good in Runner, you can actually change around your weeks to fit your schedule best. So as you say, it's not Bible, it's not set in stone, but to get in those workouts every week is the key, and you'll be consistent and you'll get your goal, hopefully.
Joe, again, you're
Can I add, and also just then
yeah,
maybe go against what you just said slightly, in that some of the solo runners versus like the team, the solo runners, you'll be running the 24 hours, like your race pace will be much slower than even like your easy running will be pretty much all the time, whereas the team people that are running quicker, then yeah, it is very much similar to going training for your 10K half marathon, other races. But also with it being the 24-hour format, someone that's targeting say a marathon as their distance goal, they could do 15 miles sort of on one day, and then within the 24 hours go and do 10 miles the next day as well. So in terms of the tactics of a soloist, depending on what their target is,
in terms of
break it down.
In terms of training for that distance, do you think that sticking to a sort of standard marathon training plan, for instance, would largely be beneficial?
Yeah, but towards the end, it's potentially considering, instead of having your just like a one long run in the week, you'd have maybe two runs back to back.
Yeah.
So you might have a long run on a Saturday.
Yeah.
I don't know, let's say 20 miles, and then a 10-mile run on the Sunday.
Yeah.
So you're not quite recovered on the Sunday, and you've got to run on tired legs, but that just sort of
you're jumping,
simulates the 24 hours, as you said at the beginning.
You're jumping the gun, Joe. You're getting ahead of our.
Sorry.
No, absolutely fine.
Off script.
It's a massively important part, and I totally agree. Before we get to that, though, let's just also zoom out a little bit from the day to day and just talk about sort of week by week what your training plan might look like over, I don't know, 12 or 16-week period. There's some good principles here that most people would subscribe to. Try not to build by more than 10% a week. Obviously, if you're an experienced runner, your body can handle more. It's possible to do more than that, but it is a good principle to stick to avoid injury. Also, the benefits of cutback weeks. Some people subscribe to them, some people don't, but they are certainly a useful tool, kind of the weekly equivalent of a rest day to help you cut back. And you want to execute a kind of standard taper, as you would for most races. Obviously, again, if you're someone who's experienced and you don't think you need a taper, this doesn't necessarily apply to you. But these are all principles that hold for most training plans, and they certainly hold for Endure24. But as Joe has hinted, there is a twist in the tail. And we think kind of the secret weapon when it comes to training for Endure24, and that is a multi-run day, or a back-to-back run. I guess you could also put that in there. But as Joe hinted, it's the benefits of simulating the race itself, simulating running on tired legs, that really a multi-run day is going to give you. So there's lots of ways you could slice this. If you've got a 20-mile run in your training plan, or even a 10-mile run in your training plan, you might want to break it up into a couple of chunks, maybe 2 5-mile runs or 2 10-mile runs, to simulate that stop-start nature of Endure24. And you can even do things like do the run, then have some food, and then a couple of hours later do the second run. And that is a very, very accurate simulation of what the Endure24 experience is like, especially if you kind of slightly overdo it on the food. It's also a great chance to practice running at all hours, as this picture illustrates. So obviously Endure24, 24 hours in a day, 12 of those are at night. And so it's a chance to maybe simulate some of that nighttime running as well. We've got some questions here on the sort of training element of things that I just wanted to put to you guys. I'll start with you, Joe. So Spencer asks, what is the longest run to complete as part of a training plan? He hasn't necessarily specified which distance he's going for, but I'm assuming he's a solo runner. He says, for instance, do you believe you should never run over 5 hours as a long run? Is a back-to-back run more beneficial? What do you reckon?
There's, I suppose, different reasons for doing that long run. the physical benefits when you're beyond that 3-4 hours, you just you're burning the fuel and stuff, and you delaying the recovery. So probably, to part answer his question, yes, don't need to go above the 5 hours, but from some of the people I've worked with, even myself, when I did my first 100 miles, it was like I wanted to know that I could run at least 50-60 miles before I went to the 100. So my longest run the first time I ran 100 miles was I think a 52-mile run over about 11 hours, something like that. But that's the mental side of knowing that I could do something for that long. I'm currently training for a 24-hour event, and my longest run has been 3 hours. And that's as far as I'm going to go. Done 28 miles in 3 hours, and that was just like the hardest workout that I'll do in the period. So I think from the mental side, if you know you can do the 24 hours, then you don't need to go longer.
And similar kind of question, Stephen says, should running this event just be treated like running an ultra? So he's basically said, for example, should I consider just doing 10 or so miles, then have a short stop and keep going? Or should I just do my long run in one big go? What do you reckon?
My preference on race days is not to stop at all, and just to have lots of walking in it. So any hill at Leeds or Reading is you walking up those hills, a walk and eat at the same time, and just keep. When you sat down, it's different for the teams because you've got probably a longer window to recover. For soloing, unless you're saying, right, I'm having a break for several hours, sitting down for 10 minutes, you're not really going to recover that much, unless you're changing your socks and freshening up your feet.
Which is important, of course. Anya, you're training for an event where you know you're going to stop multiple times.
Yeah.
What does your sort of long run and your sort of weekend look like at the moment, especially in the context of, I feel as though many people kind of really, really worry about that longest long run and maybe sort of slightly neglect thinking about the broader context of all the training that came before it. So how are you approaching that sort of longest long run piece in your training?
Yeah, I wouldn't ever, no matter if it's a marathon or an ultra, like go above the distance. Like I'd go quite far below. I am doing a lot of mileage at the moment and focusing less on speed, as you say, and more back-to-back runs, even a few like double days in the morning, in the evening. Yeah, a little bit less focus on intensity and more mileage. But I think it's more, the long runs are more of a mental training thing, just to keep me strong and to practice the things that aren't running, like fueling, and just knowing what I'm going to do when I want to give up. I think I just gain a little bit from each of those long runs.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's move on then to talk a little bit about pacing, because there were a lot of questions about this subject, and I think it's a really interesting one. So Neil and I were diving through some of the data, and we've actually got some charts, which is very, very exciting. This is a threshold first. We've got some charts on the screen. So the thing to note with pacing is the importance of consistency, and I'm sure Joe can attest to this, because this purple line on the left is indeed his line. So this is the winning solo times on the left and the winning pairs from Reading last year. And I think the thing to note here is the consistency of these lines. And obviously some are more jagged than others. I think the male pair, the purple line on the right there, is a particularly interesting story, one of them being quite obviously a bit faster than the other, but the wild time they had around the sort of lap 23 mark. But if you sort of zoom out from the individual kind of oscillations, the thing to note is just how smooth these lines are. I mean, even the winning female solo line on the left there, which looks relatively steep, the difference is only sort of half an hour or so between the slowest and fastest laps, which is in comparison to other performances a pretty consistent line. Got some questions here on pacing. Chris says, any advice for first-time pair runners on whether to do one lap each in rotation or try and do longer blocks? I'm curious, Anya, with your approach to the speed project, in terms of how you guys are approaching pacing.
Yeah.
Are you going for the sort of one lap each? Are you going to take some long, I mean, obviously it's not laps, but one block each, or are you going to sort of mix it up a bit?
Yeah, so we've got a team of 6 and we've split it into 2. So we're starting off with like 10K reps, and we're going to do 1, 2, 3, as in the first runner does 10, the second runner does 10, the third runner does 10, and we go back to the first, second, third, first, second, third.
Right.
And so the second half of the team can actually rest, just to give them a longer chance of recovery and maybe even a bit of sleep before going back to their running. That is the way we thought best.
Yeah. It's a similar question, Joe. I think this is from a solo runner, Becky. How do I manage my pace on those initial laps to prevent burning out later in the day? I mean, you can just visually see from your line here that you managed your pace very well. Obviously, your first lap was your fastest, but it was only, I think, maybe 12, 13 minutes faster than your slowest. So how should Becky go about approaching that?
As I sort of said earlier, it is walking on the first lap, and not, you're out there all day, so you really don't need to go quick. It's also think about the weather. So I mean, I think quite a few of these years we've had absolutely baking hot weather that if you're trying to run quick in the afternoon and it's really hot, you're just going to become dehydrated. You can, I think it's like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning as some of the laps I enjoy the most, because it just drops out a little bit cooler. And I tend to have, I think you can see it on there, like lap 21, lap 13, just some bit of cooler where, I don't know, you have an energy gel and it's just, go for it.
Yeah, there's a question that takes that into account, really, about variation based on the time of day. And I feel like you can kind of see, if you look at sort of the lap 5 mark, obviously you're moving at different paces, you've got to bear that in mind. But you can kind of see the heat kick in on the day, which I think is really interesting when you look at these graphs. Just checking some of these questions just to see if any of these we should cover whilst we're here.
I think there's an old phrase about ultramarathon running that says it's not the fastest, it's the person that slows down the least. And what's really interesting about certainly the solo effort that Joe put together there, I mean, he hasn't slowed down at all. He's gone out at a pace that is probably exceptionally comfortable from the get-go, and that's the reward. He's barely slowed down in the whole 24 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's look at these are also some graphs to compare. So these are the winning small teams and the winning large teams, and I think again a very similar story. Just how consistent these patterns are. Obviously, in a team, you've got different runners at different paces, and you can actually visually see that play out. But what's most interesting is just how consistent that trend is, and how people are able to sort of lock it in. And this prompted a bit of a discussion actually in the office, Neil, about how far we reckon a team that really were going for it could do. We believe the course record is 48 laps, but we reckon 50 is possible, right?
Yeah, I think you could do 49 within the 24-hour window, and then with the rules of Endure being that any laps started before the 24-hour can be completed, I think 50 is probably the maximum. I think we said, what was that, 28 minutes per lap per team member, means everyone goes twice.
Yeah.
It's enough time for you to rest and recoup and give a pretty good effort. 28 minutes is not hanging about at all. So 50, if anyone out there fancies proving us right, that'd be fantastic.
We got a question. Someone messaged me directly saying, how far is one lap? So one lap at Endure24 is 5 miles or 8 kilometers, just so you're aware. So 50 laps would be in the region of 250 miles, which is pretty bonkers. I mean, Anya, the race you're training for is 340 miles, right? And you're aiming sort of for 40 hours. So you're not far off that pace, actually, which is quite scary.
We'll see. We don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah. But are you planning sort of in the nighttime, for instance, to give it a little push, or are you aiming for sort of even splits?
We are literally just consistency, like trying to go out really super conservatively. We're gonna train or race to effort as much as we can as well. Like perceived effort, RPE. So no surging uphills or anything like that. Trying, if we're running at a 4 out of 10 before the hill, even up the hill, we're going to be running out a 4 out of 10 efforts. And hopefully we'll catch some people on the way down if people go out too fast. But yeah, kind of get bored before we get tired is the aim.
And Joe, someone actually referenced it in a question, knowing that you walk the uphills, and they wanted to know, do you walk every incline or is it more the steeper uphills? A very specific question, but I'm just curious.
It's pretty much every hill, but I think on the bottom of the first hill at Leeds is probably a little bit more shallow, so maybe that walking gets further down that hill as you get tired towards the end. But then pretty much after that, the other 2 or 3 hills, walking up those, yeah.
That's fine. Mike says in the chat, Mike says it's important to train to walk with intent, which is a good way of saying it. When you say walking, you don't necessarily mean going for a gentle stroll.
No, no.
Let's talk then a little bit about what to do when you're not running then. So Joe may not have as much experience of this at Endure24 than others, but for a lot of people running as part of a team, which I know Joe has done at other events, the recovery is a massive part of the event, and making sure that in between laps you're getting your adequate recovery. The good thing about Endure24 and kind of the opposite to what you were saying earlier, Anya, about the speed project is that we do provide a lot. This is definitely a sanctioned race, and there's a lot of support going on. And it's fair to say that we kind of see all kinds of recovery techniques, from the classic approach of just dousing your head in water to some slightly more unorthodox approaches. Not quite sure what this guy's doing, but it might be working for him. But I think the important thing to stress is that Endure24 is more than just a race. There's a huge amount of infrastructure laid out for you guys to enjoy. So make the most of base camp during the day, and of course at night with the famous fire pit. And of course, make the most of all the food and the drink that's on offer. This year, we're welcoming back Siren Brewery, who are local to Reading, and they're going to be providing all the beer, which is obviously not necessarily an essential part of the experience, but it's a recommended part. If you're a solo runner, obviously you're not perhaps spending as much time in base camp, but there is a specific area for you guys, like just to the side of the course. So you don't have to stroll too far from the course. And this is a recovery area specifically for solos, where you can have a drop bag with all of your equipment and everything that you might need, changes of socks, as Joe said, stuff like that. And it's also a chance for you to just, if you dare, take a little seat and stretch out and see if, get some recovery in. I think, Joe, you probably want to avoid sitting down if you can, right?
I think, yeah, the first year when I was going for that 100 miles, I sort of thought, I'm going to get 50 miles done, and then I'm going to step off course. I'm going to change all my kit. I'm just going to basically, I was around my tent for about 50 minutes and then started running again and just felt absolutely awful and thought that I just didn't really gain anything from stopping for 50 minutes other than changing. So then each year I've stopped fewer and fewer times. So Reading, I only stopped twice to change my socks.
But that's as a solo runner, and you can see the benefits of sort of maintaining momentum. As a team, you kind of have to stop. So there's some questions here, Anya, that I'm curious to know how you're approaching this for the speed project. So Sarah says, if you're running as a team, what's the best way to recover between laps? And similarly, Darren says, how do you ensure you don't get a buildup of too much lactic acid / muscle soreness between laps? How are you sort of thinking about that in preparation for your race?
I think, so we're going to try and rest up as much as we can, try and kind of bank sleep in blocks as much as we can. But I think nutrition's going to play a huge part in it. I know you might be able to get through your stint without some nutrition or something, but that's going to actually slow down your recovery. So it's good just to take it on, just to help you recover a bit quicker. And it's also getting the right food in that will energize you, but will also help you recover, things like protein, to help your muscles rebuild, and resting your legs, but then definitely warming up again before you run, and engaging your muscles again. Activations will really help you get going again. That's our plan.
Neil, it's something we see every year, but people make the mistake of thinking, because they're not, if they're in a team, they're not necessarily running for 24 hours themselves, but they are kind of always on in some sense, even when you're in your tent at night. We see every year people are pretty exhausted by the end of the event. Do you have any recommendations for how people might want to go about making the most of that time between laps to recover, to get ready for their next run, sort of psychologically as well as physically, I suppose?
Yeah, I think you'll probably realize in your first leg or two just how much time you've got, where your tent is. I think once you finish a lap, you're going to blink and 30 minutes is going to have passed.
Yeah.
And to Anya's point, it's not just about recovering from the lap that you've done. It's the next one that you're due to do. So if you've got 2 hours between your laps, 30 minutes is going to pass by immediately. And what you were doing in terms of 10-minute warm-up for your first couple of stints is going to become a half-hour warm-up for a couple of stints. So you need to realize that you might have 2 hours, but really you've only got an hour of that where you can sort of be stationary, eating some food. You need to really realize that there's a cool down and a warm-up that's just going to get longer as the event goes on. So it will be I'd say to your original question, I think you'll find your rhythm in your first lap. Okay, where's my tent? How long does it take to walk back? But just be kind to yourself. Give yourself a little bit of extra time to walk back to the relay changeover. Maybe walk around the campsite. Maybe walk around the base camp. Just get your blood flowing. Don't just expect to turn up at the start finish line and put the burners on.
I think to add to that, Neil, it is that the changeover in your team. So you're gonna, as a team, gonna say, right, well, I'm gonna try and run this lap in 40 minutes, but that doesn't necessarily mean the person will. And so you're gonna naturally get to the handover point probably 5 minutes earlier or whatever, because you're going to be nervous that you're going to miss them, and then they might take 5 minutes longer to run. So you could end up stood there for 10 minutes waiting for that changeover as well. So like I say, you might have had 2 hours between the runs, but by the time you've walked back and then you go back early, and then you've just got all those little bits to think about and add up.
And if you are a team, work as a team. If you're taking over, or when you're finishing your lap, tell your next teammate, this is what I want you to hand me at the finish line. This is what I want. Get that liquid on, get that food on, put your jumper on, get your body heat up, and work as a team. But I think that kind of organically starts to happen as the event evolves and the day passes by. What you'll do in the day is different to what you'll probably do in the night too.
Just throw a pizza at my face. That's my recommendation. The Finch Coasters. I'm curious. The Finch Coasters are in the chat. They're, I believe, a local running club for Reading. They said it was so hot last year. We all found the showers brilliant for freshening up between runs. That's definitely a recommendation. Obviously, most races you're not going to have the access to a shower. So definitely make the most of that. I can imagine it's hugely refreshing. Cleaning your teeth also can actually really help. I'm just curious if all the Finch Coasters are here. Like if you guys have joined sort of on one big Zoom call, do let us know, because it's great to have you here. Brad says, well, you know what? I'll save this. Brad's got a question about food, which, a very timely question about food, because let's talk about nutrition. So it's really, really important aspect of any race, but particularly when you're going for 24 hours, obviously you can't get away with just living off gels. Well, some people maybe can, but it's not necessarily recommended. I think the first thing to say is that we're not nutritionists, and food, particularly sort of sports food, is massively, massively personal. It's something that you do have to practice, and it does sort of change over time. The recommendations we can make are to train with what you will consume on race day. It's not a particularly new insight, but it's still very important to note. If you're gonna have access to certain foods on race day, you should get used to training with them. In terms of the food that's available at Endure24, sports nutrition-wise, we are still partnered with High Five, who make a fantastic range of gels and electrolyte drinks and all those stuff. Their products will be available at Endure24. So we would recommend, if you want to just rely on the nutrition that's available at the race, training with High Five products. And if you head to the Endure24 website, under the partners page, you can find a discount code that might be helpful to you. But obviously, we also provide at the aid station all the food you'd expect at a standard trail race or ultramarathon. So fruit, Coke, sweets, crisps, all the good, healthy stuff. Of course, the twist with Endure24 is the amount of food that's available in base camp. And we've talked about the importance of getting some of that in for recovery. On the nutrition subject, Joe, we've got a question here from Greg, which is quite an interesting one. How would you fuel in the 48 hours before starting the race? Do you change anything in the build up to a 24-hour race in terms of what you're eating?
Simple answer for me is no, I don't. Now that's because with the high volume training, I'm fueling lots, and then when I go into the taper, I'm still consuming a similar amount. So, and naturally, the taper looks after sort of rebuilding the carb. So I'm not, it's carb loading, but I'm not taking on more than I was before. It's the reduction in volume that I'm not burning the energy to build the carb stores. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question from Brad. What are some good ideas of foods to eat? As he says, I can't imagine having a lot of gel shots without starting to feel a bit queasy. Anya, for the speed project, where you're potentially going to be sort of in go mode for 40 hours or longer, what's your sort of fueling strategy? How are you guys approaching that?
We're definitely going to be a actual real food approach first, and kind of use all the gels as supplements to get us through the last, well, when we really, really need them. But we are going to be having lots of medjool dates. We were told are really good, like Pitt's medjool dates, wrap them in cling. I've used them in marathons. I've wrapped them in cling film, put them in my sports bra. Yeah, because they are just basically sugar and carbs. I know friends that have sweet potato and put salt on it as well, things like that. But yeah, banana, peanut butter, things that you're used to in your everyday diet, and also something that you'll enjoy eating and won't hate eating. I think that's pretty important. But yeah, high salt's really good. And yeah, sorry, just back to your first question about the days leading up. For a marathon, I've always been told, carb loading is the main thing because carbohydrates are like your primary energy source, but then healthy fats are really important if you go into carb depletion. So things like omega-3s, salmon, avocado, like kind of Mediterranean olive oil kind of diet, that's really good for your like taper into a race. So yeah, keep that in mind.
We had a very oddly specific question on that subject, actually, which I don't know if there's a good answer to this, but Faisal says, would you eat avocados early in the race or later due to the heat? He's made the assumption that you will eat avocados. It's just a matter of when. I don't know. I don't want to speak for either of you guys, but personally, I wouldn't dive for the avocados during a race. What are your thoughts on that?
I've had avocado wraps. Like, I think, again, solo, you go in steady, I'll walk and eat at the same time. So you've got time to take it on. More solid foods. If you're running really quick, then you need things that are, I suppose, more liquid form. But
Anya, are you dialing in the avocado?
I've never had avocado in a race. I wouldn't say no to it. I quite enjoy eating it. I'm not sure though.
Oh, there you go. Neil, as someone who's spent a lot of time in the Endure24 base camp as well, we do have to cover the plethora of food on offer there. Do you have any personal favorites? Not necessarily on the race nutrition side, just some good old grub.
I think I survived solely from Thursday to Sunday on pizza, and I'll stick to that same tactic this year. And I'd recommend everyone to do the exact same thing.
Our mission is to make up for the calories that everyone on course is burning.
Sympathy, wonderful.
Yeah, Gina from Finch Coast has confirmed that most of the club are out on a run, but she is here representing them, and she's going to feed back the webinar. So thanks for joining us, Gina, the club secretary. I'm also a club secretary, if that's interesting, of Crystal Palace Fun Runners. Shout out to them who will be joining us at Reading. So let's dive into the last subject that we're going to cover here before we get to the general Q&A, which is preparing your team. Obviously not as relevant for the solo runners, but the team dynamic is a massive part of Endure24, and we just think it's important that it's something you prepare for. As we said here, if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And obviously lots of people come to Endure24 and they just want to have a good time. They're not targeting a particular distance. They're not really fussed about how far they all go, as long as they all get some time on course. That is absolutely fantastic, and it's a massive part of the Endure24 experience. But there are teams who show up and they want to win, or they want to outperform themselves last year, and they want to get the best performance out there. So we think there's a couple of points here that we just want to get across to those people to think about in the build-up to Endure24. The first of which, Reading, is approaching 16 weeks away. I think it's less than that, actually. So the first is strategy. Design a strategy that's right for you guys. Have a think about in your team who can tolerate the night miles, for instance. Who's maybe a better night runner? Who can surge late in a race? Who's got those sprinting legs in the last legs of the races that you do? And maybe who's up for doing more laps? You don't necessarily have to all do the same number of laps. You might have someone who wants to bank some extra ones. So set a strategy that you think is appropriate to your team. Don't just follow the prescribed thing of we're all going to do one lap each if you don't think that's right for your team. It might be right for your team, but have a think about that. But the second point is then just prepare to be adaptable. Things change across the course of 24 hours. People go through lows. Some people feel great, some people feel terrible. So be prepared to, of course, switch it up and just stay in constant communication with your team about how you're going to sort of approach the laps as they're unfolding in front of you. You might want to think about maybe changing up the order if someone's flagging. You might want to switch to double laps, things like that. So just prepare to change, really. And the last point really is just be kind to one another. Hopefully it goes without saying, runners are all friendly people, but there's going to be moments when you're tired and hungry. I'm sure, Anya, on the speed project, there'll be moments when people are flagging a little bit, and it's just important to sort of show the love and keep that positivity going. On that, Anya, I mean, as a team, I guess aside from the running, how are you guys preparing for, you know, this journey you're going to go on together?
Yeah, it's interesting you said, like, yeah, we've given everybody roles basically in our team. So we've got someone that's going to be the hype girl, someone's on the music, someone's on spare change of clothes, because I was told you really want to change things like socks and underwear, especially to give you that extra boost. Yeah, food, just so it's not like if as you say, if you want someone just to throw a pizza in your face, you don't want to feel awkward asking that. Like, everyone knows their job at the start and basically you're all in it together, so you shouldn't ever be afraid to ask for those things. But yeah, I think we will just try and keep morale as high as possible, and work on a strong mindset of when it goes tough, know what you're going to do when it gets to that point, because inevitably it is going to be tough. It's not an easy thing to do, otherwise everybody would be doing it. So I think a lot is self-belief and kind of preparing yourself mentally as much as possible before.
Do you think it's important that you get to know your teammates on a sort of slightly deeper than surface level, or do you think you can sort of just put it together by going in on a strategy?
I think you'll all have a lot in common already and similar interests by all doing this, and I think you'll probably get on very well. But I think you can get to know each other as well as you can, and maybe even chat to each other about when it gets tough, this is something that will keep me going. But you'll never, after an event like this, you'll get to know each other better than you could have ever got to know them, I think, in any other scenario. So I think you've got to open up and you've got to kind of be vulnerable in situations like this and let people help you and go all in with each other as a team.
Well, as Gina said, the Finch coasters found the benefits of showering during the race, so they certainly got to know one another very well. Joe, I know you've taken part in other events as a team. How do you find navigating that team dynamic when, you know, runners are often solitary creatures, we're used to executing on our own?
Well, I was gonna just add that even like the solo runners, you can pair up with other solo runners and it creates a team whilst you might not have the chance to plan, but on the day you can find yourself you're not just on your own. You're part of a bigger system. You can speak to some of the team runners. Everyone's like, you know, they're dead friendly out there, so you can often, if you get back to that solo tent and you need someone to run off and get you some water or something, there tends to be someone around that's willing to help, or other runners saying, you know, I've got some water boiling here if you want some spare and the like. So I think speak to the other people around you, because that'll help you as a solo. And it is sort of, as everyone said here, in terms of pre-planning, you'll make bad decisions when you're tired, so the more you can plan ahead of time, you sort of can just fall to those decisions by default. You don't want to laying your kit out or things like that. So if you come back to your tent and you're tired, and you're like, where do I find my socks? Just all those sort of little things. In the dark, you don't want to be digging around, wasting your time and your energy, when really you want to be resting, ready for your next lap if you're in a team. So again, having your tent organized is probably a tip to think about.
Yeah, I mean, Anya touched on it, Neil, but we see all kinds of roles emerging across the team dynamic, from the hype man to the sort of mother hen of the group, emerging in camp, and those
Yeah.
personalities coming forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the cajolers, there's the people that will put in the extra effort. I think we've covered it, but there's the plan A you'll have, but it's really good to have that plan B in mind. With any race, strategies seldom go to plan, so it's always good. Year on year, I'll walk the campsite and hear of people losing team members, and just having a little bit of an understanding of what you'll do. I remember someone saying once that we know we'll lose people, so we'll do 1, 2, but never 3 in terms of the amount of laps that people would do. So that was their fallback, that if we start losing people, we might have to do double laps, but we'll make sure the plan B is we'll never do a triple lap, because at that point, it starts to become individually a bit strenuous. So
Should clarify, when you say lose people, you mean they dropped out? We didn't actually lose them. Safety is our number one priority at Endure24.
They returned to their tent and didn't come back out yet. So that was
absolutely. Amazing. Well, we've reached the end of our topics. We've got some questions that were provided in advance. So with the last sort of 5-10 minutes, we'll just whistle through some of these. And if you've got any more questions, do drop them in the chat. The first of these are there's a few around night running, which is obviously a massive part of the Endure24 experience. Some general ones: how do you cope with nighttime running? But also a team specific one. I'm in a team of 5, and we're all going to take it. This is Tina. She says, I'm in a team of 5, and we'll all take a turn running. My question is, if you've never run through the night, how do you prepare yourself for night running? Particularly interested in sleep and nutrition. Anya, I'll come to you first. Given that you're training for an event that's going to involve some night running, how much of it have you done in the past, and how are you feeling about sort of doing it in this race?
I'm not gonna lie, I haven't done a lot, but I think I'm going to ignore the fact it is night, as much as possible. Obviously, safety and everything, but more in the sense of I'll be practice of running on tired legs, and I think that will be the thing I focus on more than the time of day. I mean, with a challenge like this, time doesn't seem real anyway. So I think focus on the recovery as much as you can, and
Joe, it's same question to you, but also Sam has asked, is it best to go through the night or get a few hours sleep? Obviously, it depends on your goals. I know you don't stop to sleep, but what are your thoughts on sleep and lack thereof?
Well, it links to the fact that when you're tired, you're going to make those poor decisions, and everything's going to feel that little bit worse.
Oh, I think we may have lost Joe.
You know, that little niggle that you got is probably because oh, sorry, did I drop out?
Yeah, no, we've got you back, Joe. Sorry, you were just saying you might feel a bit worse at night, make worse decisions.
As you're tired, so going through the night, but the change in light as it sort of comes through to the day, it's quite, if you're out at that sunrise, it's quite uplifting. It gives you that extra bit of energy. And as I said, the cooler temperatures at night, actually, I've found it easier to run in. So I think some of the most difficult times of the day tend to be when it's really baking hot late afternoon, and then when you come through to the morning, again, it can get quite warm, sort of between that 9 and 10 time, but you can see that you're getting towards the finish line. So yes, sleep wise, as a solo, I would try and go through, but as you said, it depends on your target.
Niv has asked if you've got any favorite podcasts. I'm assuming he's talking in the context of sort of whiling away the hours. Are either of you guys podcast listeners when you're running?
I listen to all sorts of stuff. People talking about running while I'm running, or
I was going to say the same. I think some people want to ignore the fact they're running, but listening to an inspirational podcast, I think, always helps.
I think for solo runners, it's maybe try not to go to the podcast or the music too soon.
Yeah.
Like within the 24 hours, if you can do a lap and think, oh, really could do with some music now, if you can make yourself almost do another lap and then go to the music, you've ticked off another hour of time that's passed. Otherwise, you go to the music and then maybe after, I don't know, 6-7 hours worth of music podcast, you think, what next? And you've still got another 8 hours to go.
Yeah. It's a bit like a long haul flight where you've exhausted all your options. I mean, Neil, I know you've done some long races before. Personally, I found that if I was to whack a podcast on sort of 18 hours in, I think my brain would just not be able to sort of process what I'm listening to. What's your take on sort of using audio as a support tool at Endure?
Yeah, I probably agree to that. I would only look to use it in the quiet periods. When the event, when it starts, there's so much excitement and there's a strategy to try and execute. And then towards the back end, I don't think you're going to absorb much of it. I think again, the atmosphere from sunrise till 12 o'clock is what's going to carry you forward. There are some of those hours in between, probably the dark hours. Maybe you want some entertainment for that. But to your question on night running a second ago, I think at Endure it's actually something to really look forward to. There's always somebody out there. I marshalled one year, and I was looking at the runners coming towards me with head torches, and there's barely a 20-second break before the next headlamp comes around the corner. So you'll always be out there with someone. And to what Joe said about the temperature, I remember standing at the start line at Reading last year, trying to just provide that as motivation that the sun's going to go down in a minute. This sweltering heat that we had, which was amazing, and it was great to have a dry, sort of warm event, but it was on the verge of being too hot. So actually look forward to the night running. You'll get probably your better performances physically.
100%.
And enjoy it with the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad has said, is the course lit the whole way around, or are there parts which are very dark? Most of the course is pretty well lit, Joe. I mean, you've run it more than most.
Yeah, Leeds now they've cut back those trees where many years ago it used to be called deep dark wood, and it was very dark. But yeah, they've taken a lot of those trees back. So if you've got a clear night and moonlight, then yeah, there's a lot of the course that is quite open. As Neil says, though, you've got people visually just all around you in terms of being able to see. So it's not lit in terms of well, you can see on the screen there's a few sort of fairy lights that sort of give the edges of the course in places. I think there's maybe a few lights around the aid station and the likes, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. We do have some magical fairies as well who appear at midnight, so keep your eye out for them. I think we're pretty much approaching wrap up. We just got one question from Leanne, who said, "How do you prevent blisters?" Leanne, that's obviously a very broad question, and it is deeply personal. But I would point you in the direction of ProFeet, who are a partner of ours on Endure24. You can get in touch with them. There is a discount code on the website, and they can sort you out with all kinds of foot care solutions, including like custom insoles and all that kind of stuff. So I would look into that. I wouldn't want to necessarily make a broad brush recommendation on that. Well, if there's no more questions coming in on the chat, then I think that's pretty much it. The only thing that remains is for me to thank Joe and thank Anya for joining us this evening, and of course thank Neil. It's been a fantastic chat, and I'm really, really, really grateful for you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Yeah, and best of luck, Anya, at the Speed Project. We will be following along on socials.
Thanks so much.
All right. Cheers, everyone.